Well, good morning, everybody. Great to see so many of you, some familiar faces, some ones that have joined us for the first time. It's wonderful to see each and every one of you, and I cannot say more with any more emphasis than I cannot wait to see you all in person, hopefully very soon. And I hope you guys have all of you have some plan to see somebody that you love very soon or a friend of yours, because everybody on this chat deserves it. Toni, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Great to see you too. And Pierre Debbas, as usual, thank you for lending us your time and expertise for another Friday morning coffee chat.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody, for having us this morning. I have to apologize. I'm taking this from my bedroom today. I've been walking to my office almost daily since the beginning of May. And if I continue to go daily, I may be a single middle-aged man with 2 kids and asking you guys to hook me up with somebody because my wife will kill me. So Fridays is my work from home day. If you see a child jump in the background or you see somebody's, pajamas you shouldn't see in the background, I apologize. So, you guys know we've been doing this cool rotation of continuing education classes and Q&As every other week. Tuesday, I believe I'm doing a NYRAC exclusive CE class on representing foreign investors, which I've mentioned on many of my sessions the last 2 months, that interest from abroad has certainly picked up as a result of what we're going through. I've had more phone calls and new clients from overseas in the last 2 months than I have in a couple of years.
So can you specify, just curious, because I just went on a listing presentation last week, I think it was, or this week, forget. And it was the first time in a long time where the sellers were very focused on getting overseas buyers. So I'm curious to hear where these calls are coming from. Just diverting for one moment. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. It's relevant to Tuesday's class. So, interestingly enough, 2 of them I received were from Africa, and a couple from Europe and 1 from Hong Kong, none from mainland China. And that's really, I want to say it was about 5 in the last 2 months. And 3 from, about 2-3 from Europe, 1 from Hong Kong and 2 from Africa.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with foreign investors, kind of dive right into questions. The thing that they try to time the market, and there's a lot of money on the sidelines, and they've been waiting for the last couple of years because they keep thinking the market's going to keep declining. I've met with a number of them over the years, and they keep saying, we're in no rush because we anticipate you have an influx of inventory in the luxury product and prices will come down. Now you're in the middle of a crisis. What will bring prices further down than this, right? Like this, if you are to try to predict a quote unquote bottom, from abroad, this is the bottom, right? Like this is it. It's not gonna get worse than this or a better buying opportunity for them from a negotiation perspective. So I'm pretty bullish on that for the balance of 2020, to be perfectly honest. But guys, what I wanted to do, I'm really happy Toni's joining us today because historically you guys email questions to Al or Anna in advance. Nobody had any questions, so I'm assuming everybody's, deals are these days. But I wanted to kind of spice it up just from the Q&A with me and, to loop Toni in as one of the board members of NYRAC and kind of compare and contrast what our predictions are for the marketplace reopening. Is phase 2's rumored to start June 22nd is what the date they're throwing out there, which sounds interesting. So I thought it'd be a good conversation. Also, question, then figured we'll keep it an open, casual conversation like we always do. So Toni, do you want to kind of interject a little bit, or if anybody has any specific topics they want to lead with?
I actually have a question.
Sure.
June 22nd so often, but then the mayor had said, I think it was about a week ago, phase 2 likely won't begin at the earliest until the first week of July. We're all just very confused about when that's happening. All of our clients are asking us, do you have any insight on that?
I think if it's up to the mayor, it would be opening in July of 2021, to be quite honest. And I don't talk politics, but that's my jab for the day. It's been a mess. It's been a mess. Cuomo's talking about the 22nd. I'll tell you internally, I'm planning for my office. We're targeting the 29th to hedge against, to give us enough time to prepare, and also for these guys, who don't necessarily know what they're doing. I would say, between June 29th and mid-July should be a pretty fair 2-week window where I think we'll actually open.
I think, yeah, I mean, who knows? I heard the same thing. And I think it will depend what happens like by Monday, right? I think they'll probably call it Monday would be my guess. Like if the numbers remain low because there's a spike somewhere. And so when I was in Manhattan a couple of days ago, like everybody was wearing face masks, which was a good sign.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I mean, let me ask you guys this: what are your clients? You know, you guys who are chatting with clients regularly, what's their outlook on the market? You know, with a real opening, you know, in the immediate future, are people ready to, you know, start shopping? Are people ready to start listing? Or, you know, what do you see as a momentum going into this?
Yeah. I mean,
Go ahead, Tony.
yeah, I mean, I think everybody's ready to go as soon as we can go.
Yeah.
You know, sellers, we'll see what happens with the buyers. I mean, look, if you're a buyer and you believe in New York and you, you know, want to live there and you're not going to relocate, like it's an amazing time. It's going to be one of those times when we look back at now and, you know, how people always go, I should have.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be I should have time. Interest rates went down and prices are so low. The problem we have is these co-op boards. I'm hearing from my colleagues that the boards are turning these people down because of these numbers, and that's so crazy.
Yeah, we started having that as an issue pre-pandemic. We had a couple boards that were trying to dictate pricing, and it's a horrible issue to encounter. We actually almost went into litigation with one board because they were so egregious in what they thought the property was worth. It made no sense whatsoever. Luckily, we settled. But, you know, it's interesting because there's a lot of chatter. I don't know if you guys attended my webcast on Tuesday. I started, you know, I'm doing the continuing education classes through the New York Real Estate Center, which is one of your guys' sponsors, on a weekly basis. And I started doing a webcast called Real Estate Talks with Pierre Debbas. And it's a 30-minute informal session for the whole real estate community. And I was talking about a couple interesting anecdotes that pertain to what we're discussing today. One about, you know, reopening, and do we anticipate a flood of listings? You know, right now the chatter in town is that everybody's going to leave New York City and move to the burbs, and, you know, especially, you know, young families, they're done with schools, you know, up in the air whether they'll reopen, and whether we think that that's just chatter or that will result in actual, you know, creation of more inventory, and you'll see somewhat of an exodus of the city from a certain demographic. And I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that, because, you know, I personally, you know, don't think it's going to be nearly as robust as people anticipate. You know, I love New York City, right? I don't think there's you can drag me out of here, but, you know, at the end of the day, you know, I'm curious to hear what you guys think about that.
It's interesting because we're at the time of year anyway where school is ending, would have been ending, and people were going to be leaving for the summer where the kids were going to camp. Now they're not going to camp, but the families do want to get out of New York because the kids need room to play and things of that nature. So like the timing of it's kind of interesting. I think it's going to depend. I've heard like in the Hamptons here, there's over 100 new applicants for the schools. People are willing to put the deposit down and lose the deposit to hedge whether to go back to New York or stay out here. I've heard Florida schools are like full. A lot of people are considering that. So, you know, it's going to be super interesting.
It will be. You know, I'll give you some interesting anecdotes on the market. I was talking about this on the show on Tuesday. So from a macro like perspective, I did a lot of research in terms of what are housing stats throughout the entire United States. And interestingly enough, applications for home purchase, for mortgages to buy homes, not refinances, home purchase mortgages, applications have been increasing every week for the last 7 weeks. May 2020 applications were 17% higher than May 2019. Like that's crazy to think. Like during the last 7 weeks, well, I'm terrible at math. What does that get us to? That gets us to mid-April. So since mid-April till now, you're telling me that the demand for home purchases has increased during this time. You know, like I think it's a great indicator for what the consumer wants and is gearing up for getting ready for a reopening. I think it's a tremendous indicator. Now, how will that translate to our local New York City market, right? Like that's more from a macro perspective. Our local New York City market, you know, I think it all depends on what consumer confidence of New York City is. Like Toni, you've been doing this, you lived through September 11th, you lived through the financial crisis. You know, here's crisis number 3 in the last 20 years. Where, like, how do you see, like when I think about where are the negatives of the market, right? Not to be overly optimistic, The negatives to me are A, unemployment is still pretty wretched, slash job security, and B, consumer confidence in the New York City market. So taking that into consideration with the optimism I have, how would you compare this to the prior crises and expectations for what the market's going to look like in the next couple months?
Yeah, I mean, you can't compare this to anything else we've been through, because the whole entire world, every single person on this planet, think about that, every single person on this planet is being affected, right? And so like other crises, it wasn't everybody, it was like large segments, large parts of places, but it was never this. So I don't think you can compare now, like with all the vandalism in New York. But like, I think as the world moves on, right, as the decades go on, like things change and we have to pivot and we have to do things differently. And I think that's what we're facing right now. So what's great about it is, and I don't know, like, I'd love to hear you guys chime in. Hi, Maris. So I'm loving the fact that we're doing showings virtually, right? So the consumer sees the listing first online, then the broker calls us or the buyer calls us and we take them through a video tour. And then they decide if they want to see it. So I'm seeing like a lot of our running around, like tireless running around, is like taken off the table, because we're seeing these people, they're like deciding before they come see it whether they want to see it. So I think that's been great.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're going to see the whole process streamlined from what you guys do and from what we do, because you're going to weed out a lot of people who like to waste time and just look at properties.
Yeah, and so like we were on a new development call, and I think new developments are going to be doing the same thing there. I think open houses are going to be off the table.
Yep.
For a while, unless you have a really, really lax building or a non-doorman building or something like that. I think open houses are going to be off the table for a while, which is great, right? It's could be a time sucker, maybe, at times they are. And I think like each building is going to have their own protocols. Like I know I took some notes that in the new development buildings, the buyer, when they come, after they get through the virtual tour, is going to have to sign 2 forms from REBNY. One is a limitation of liability and the other is acknowledgement assumption of exposure. So, they're going to have to go through that. And then maybe some buildings potentially could take their temperature before they come in. I know in China at the airports, they have this like big thing that can detect if you have a fever or not. So like maybe some buildings will be putting them in the lobby. There's a lot of different things that are going to happen, to protect another spike.
Yeah, no, I think the concept of an open house will probably become an obsolete concept as a result of this. I honestly think, for our perspective, you're not going to have an in-person closing ever again. I think that we're going to, once we can all get back into the office, like Nick and I have closed dozens of deals virtually in the last couple months. It's more time consuming now because everybody working on the deal is potentially in a different state, or at least, we're not all in one physical space where it's easier to scan, FedEx, process wires. Once we're actually in an office, I think that closings will be done virtually forever. I don't think the in-person idea of sitting there for an hour and a half to 2 hours it's similar to what we're saying about you guys streamlining the process. I think the whole industry is going to do it. And we've realized that this will create efficiencies for us moving forward, is one of the few positive outcomes of this whole mess.
Pierre, what is one of the things that you would like to see, that whether it's a technology or something that would make the closings like more seamless? Like what needs to happen for managing agents and your industry to get up to make things like this is the norm now?
Yeah, it's I'm really happy you asked that, because the way that our industry handles these deals, I felt for years has been a bit antiquated. I did a CE for you with Jim Brune from Board Packager for you guys a couple weeks back, and we were talking about how take the due diligence component. Why don't buildings have all due diligence materials on a library on the internet where I can just go access it, and there's a questionnaire, there's minutes, the minutes are secured, I can email them, I can the whole point of having people come in and out of offices and a commute, you know, like I'd have somebody go commute 45 minutes to go read board minutes. There could be 3 pages of minutes and they wasted 2 hours of their day doing this. It was so inefficient. Closings, why can't we sign electronically? Why aren't we signing documents electronically? We have clients all over the world, you know, like it's crazy that we've not done this yet. And I think that this is going to push us over the hill to start doing that.
May I chime in there for a second?
Yeah, of course.
And these are, yeah, I fully agree with what you guys are saying. And with regard to the closing process, these were things that actually other states were accustomed to. So an electronic closing where nobody attended, the title company ran the settlement component, which means that all the money came there and they distributed checks, so on and so forth, and then everybody DocuSigned remotely from wherever they were. These are things that are happening in, you know, call it 15 other states in the United States, but it's unfamiliar territory to New York. By way of executive order, we've now encountered these types of closing mechanisms, so on and so forth. And what I do think is that you'll see them, this will become the standard. So New York will start adopting some of these technologies. You'll see local title companies utilizing some of these remote online notarization technologies that they use in Arizona and they use in Illinois. And that component will make it easier for you to close transactions.
Our biggest obstacle is going to be co-ops. Real property, like for our office in TitleVest, it mapped out a seamless system for doing this. It's the managing agents adapting to it, right? We all know managing agents, they're always difficult to deal with in every aspect. I think this is going to impact how you guys do board applications too. Everything. I think the whole process will become more efficient. What else is everybody seeing out there? Because I want to hear what you guys, you know, guys, for those of you negotiating deals, are you seeing anything different in the negotiations? Any unorthodox requests? Like what trends are you seeing going into our reopening?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all still trying to figure it out, right? You know, I know that the buildings are all talking now about how to reopen. I'm not talking about the office buildings, although they're doing that too, right? I'm talking about like each individual co-op and condo. So, you know, whether they allow like only the selling broker with the client or the buyer's broker with the client and not the selling broker has to wait outside, or, you know, it'd be weird to have the owners start showing the properties. I mean, it's just, you know, we're going to have to see.
Yeah, for sure. Hold on, sorry.
I'm finding that there's definitely interest in our exclusives, and we're getting a lot of inquiries, and I think a lot of buyers are ready to get out there. I think there are some buyers who are hesitant to do virtual tours and, you know, 3D tours, and I think they just can't grasp that concept, even though there may actually be a way to facilitate that showing through the owner. But I think, you know, I know personally, I have several buyers who are just waiting to get out there and who are ready and not scared to do so.
Right. Well, you know, another interesting stat to throw to you that I think would help those buyers, the Freddie Mac 30-year fixed mortgage hit a all-time low this week, historic low. It's lower than it's been in the history of the country. You know, like that was the big factor in 2019 for driving demand was interest rates. And now the Fed's even talking about cutting rates further. You know, like that's kind of like a second chance to dive in at the low interest rate environment that we did not think we would have at this point in the year. So I think that's another great thing to throw up, you know, to tell all your potential buyers.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what you guys, if you're negotiating on anything in the new developments. I've just heard some crazy stories. Them now trying to sell in bulk. Maybe that's where the foreign investor is going to come in, and just giving, you know, like a lot away.
Has anybody done any bulk new development deals yet? I haven't personally, but I'm curious to see, you know, have you seen like a package of 10 units given at a 20% discount or something along those lines?
Yeah, no, I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it yet.
The Real Deal wrote an article about this, right? Was that where you saw it? I remember seeing the same thing kind of like a week or two ago, but I'm not encountering it in practice. If anything, I want to say in the last month, we've probably gotten 5 new development deals in the door for, you know, that we're negotiating. So there's activity, you know, there's certainly activity. I'm an optimist when it comes to our profession, you know, but I'm excited to reopen and see how things pick up.
Yep. So in some of the other Zoom calls we've had over the last few months, people were technically going to call the fourth quarter of 2019 the bottom, right? So like we were anywhere from like 10 to 20%, maybe some instances 25, maybe somebody was unrealistically high, which brought it up to 25% discount, but now we're that or more. I mean, it's crazy to think like New York is on sale like that.
Anybody?
Again, the thing that I'm worried about is these co-ops. Like I wish somehow as NYRAC or, you know, an industry, we can educate them because they're seriously hurting their people that are living in the building. They're preventing them from moving on with their lives. And, you know, they're antiquated as far as like not allowing LLCs or, you know, that's something talk about that's been antiquated that hasn't shifted in decades that needs to shift.
Yep. You know, it's funny. I'll tell you how you do it because we represent about 75 condo boards. And I'll have a board come to me and say, you know, it started 10 years ago when they were apprehensive to allow people to use a trust to buy real estate. Remember that? Like co-ops would not allow trusts a decade ago. Now, you know, luckily they've adapted and realized that a trust is a legitimate mechanism and that we can figure out how to navigate. LLCs, it's kind of similar. You know, you provide obviously all of the ownership documents. The fear is, you know, to amend an LLC ownership, you amend an operating agreement, which is not a recorded document, right? So the fear for the board is that, you know, a week after closing, you're going to go switch who actually owns the LLC. The way to hedge against that is you get personal guarantees from the people who are applying to the board to live there, and you get an occupancy affidavit. And if anything, the board can implement a system where they have to have proof on an annual basis that membership of the LLC has not been altered. You know, it's really, you know, it is, you can do it. It's going to be like trust. It's going to take a decade for them to come around to figure it out.
We don't have a decade.
That's what we said with the trust.
That's another decade. Yikes.
I'm looking at some of the questions. Hey, Eliana, do you want to ask yours to the group? It's a pretty good question.
Yeah, sure. Hi. Sorry, my camera on my phone doesn't work. Thank you for all these conference calls. They're really terrific. My question is, how are you guys dealing with pricing for new business? I mean, we're kind of struggling. Do you go off historical numbers, which aren't necessarily relevant, or are you kind of saying, okay, we've got to discount the price because it's now post-COVID? Just your thoughts.
Yeah, so we're doing that. We've been on a couple of listing presentations, and I've looked and I've seen, and the price has been that price since like October of 2019, and I'm saying you have to like discount. It depends on the price point. So for me, it's like 5, 7, or 10% off of where they were pre-COVID. You have to do that. You have to take that off to kind of meet the market, and then maybe take out some of the negotiation depending on the property and how it shows and where it is and the building and the maintenance and all that. But I'm using like 5, 7, 10% just depending on pricing. And like so far, I have not had much resistance. You know, it doesn't feel good to some people, and some people are like, "You sure that's all? Should we do more?"
I'll jump in. I'm getting the same. I'm getting zero pushback from sellers in terms of price recommendations. I'm telling them flat out, this is probably the worst possible time to be listing your apartment, and they don't care. They're listening to whatever I tell them in terms of pricing, and I'm saying the same thing, anywhere from 5 to 10% from where I would have a couple months ago. And I don't think we're going to know until we open up. I think there's going to be a flood of new listings in the next couple of weeks.
For sure.
That's what we're going to be up against. And I'm getting obviously a lot more sellers right now than buyers coming through the door and inundated with new listings. So I'm excited, but I'm nervous about what's to come and how quickly these things are actually going to sell. I think you talk to photographers, the videographers, everybody is already backed up, you know, for weeks in anticipation of this. And it's going to be a very, very busy time for all of us. And I think a successful time for us, but we're going to be working a lot harder. We're not doing the open houses, but you know, we're going to be working around the clock in other ways just to get buyers through the door.
Yeah.
Hey, Adam, let me ask you, is the flood of listings that you're anticipating people who are just, I'm leaving the city for good, that's it?
So I have, probably 10 new listings on the table. 3 or 4 of them are going to Florida, and some of them were already thinking about going to Florida before all this happened. And this was the breaking point. They were moving for tax reasons, for better lifestyle. I have 2 people moving to California, and others, they are worried about school coming up in the fall and are getting out now, and they don't care, you know, in terms of what they walk away with in terms of pricing. They say that now. We'll see if that actually happens.
Of course. Yeah.
I think the issue always is with pricing. People, they can't fathom losing money or not making money in New York real estate. Now they kind of have an excuse where if they're talking to friends or family and they take a hit on pricing, everybody understands why. And, you know, there's less, I'll say, embarrassment or whatever you want to call it in terms of making it easier for them to swallow, not walking with a profit.
And it sounds like the profile of these clients is pretty diverse, right? It sounds you described like people retiring, young families, singles. We're pitching somebody. It's not really pitching. We're really, you know, just getting the listings in many cases. They're not really shopping it around. They want to get things going. And as soon as we're able to show, they want us through the door.
Yeah, just for the sake of time, because I have to jump on a call, but like these things are fantastic. Thank you so much for doing this. And I think it's important for all of us to, as an industry, bond together, keep talking to one another as we learn and we help each other through these, you know, times.
Yeah, guys, thank you. Nick, thanks for setting up. Tony, thanks for jumping on with me today. It's great to see everybody. And God knows I spend half my day on Zoom, so I'm sure I'll see you guys in the next day or two on one of these things. So thank you guys and have a great weekend.
Have a good weekend, everybody.